Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Sydney Konahia, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Membership with the IFA, and we have a great 60 minutes lined up for you this afternoon. Before we begin, I just want to touch on a couple things. Today's webinar is recorded, and the recording, along with a slide deck, will be made available on community.franchise.org this evening. And if you have any questions for today's speakers, please add them to the chat or questions box, and they will be answered towards the end of the session. Today's topic is the Franchise Marketing Trifecta, how to drive growth in units, talent acquisition, and loyal customers. And it is brought to us by Location 3. Here to provide today's discussion are Josh Allen, VP of Marketing with Location 3, Vera Shafiq, VP of Digital Strategy with Location 3, and Michelle McKee, VP of Marketing with Annex Brands. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you again to Location 3 for sponsoring today's webinar. And I will now turn things over to our speakers to get us started.
All right. Thank you very much, Sydney, and thanks everyone who is joining live today and maybe watching the recording again at a later date. As Sydney mentioned, my name is Josh Allen. I am the Vice President of Marketing at Location 3, and we are here today to talk about the Franchise Marketing Trifecta. Before we do that, first, a little bit about Location 3. We are the premier digital solution in franchising. We work with franchisors and franchisees to really help them drive growth through excellence in local marketing and ultimately drive growth in revenue. Happy Franchisor Appreciation Day to all the franchisors out there as well. If you want to get in contact with Location 3, you can find us on all of the top line social channels. You can reach us on our website or email us directly at hello@location3.com. We've been IFA members since 2008. We love being a part of this community. And the last thing I'll say is if you're looking to connect in person, we'll actually be at Franchise Springboard here in a couple of weeks and sponsoring the Emerging Franchisor Conference in November with IFA as well. Joining me today for the live discussion portion of today's webinar, as Sydney mentioned, are my colleague and our Vice President of Digital Strategy at Location 3, Vera Shafiq, as well as Michelle McKee, who is the Vice President of Marketing for franchisor Annex Brands. Before we kind of dive into the franchise marketing trifecta model, let's talk a little bit about the current landscape today, both from a market and an economic standpoint, and certainly a franchising standpoint. For those of you watching the news, the stock market itself has had probably its roughest week in I think roughly 2 years. There's no question that market forces are creating a lot of headwinds for franchisors and franchisees that are impacting marketing and impacting the ability to really reach customers and drive the growth that I think we are all seeking both in 2022 and beyond. With demand and inventory challenges, lower expected income across the country and across the globe, there's expectation that many consumers are likely going to be less willing to spend, and it's going to be more competitive to attract their hard-earned dollars. Beyond that, on the business level, increased variable costs. I'm sure everybody here has felt and is continuing to feel some impact of supply chain issues. There's a lot in the news, specifically even this week, on supply chain and some of the things that are at the forefront. A lot of brands, as a result, are less bullish on marketing spend, or at least reining in marketing spend as a result of those increased variable costs. In addition to that, really prioritization of short-term profit. A lot of organizations are feeling the pressure to, as I said, rein in that spending, be more tactical in how they spend, particularly on marketing, and really be, I would say, even more of an emphasis on demonstrating that return. And then lastly, there's a lot of adjustment happening in the market for historic growth. Coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of companies, certainly in the ad tech space, which is relevant to us, but really across the board, that budgeted and planned for historic growth, but because of economic conditions being what they are relative to consumer, but also even in the recruitment space, which we'll talk a little bit about, excess costs are being required to be drawn back a bit. From a hiring and a recruitment perspective, this is some great data from McKinsey & Company. It's no surprise and no secret to everyone, the Great Resignation, as it's referred to, is still having ripple effects across virtually every business category that franchising touches. The majority of folks, as seen on screen here, who have quit their jobs in the past 2 years have stated in a recent survey that they are not intending to return to the same industry that they once left. How does this impact your business? How does this impact franchising as a whole when it comes to recruitment? Beyond that, there's specific categories, and consumer and retail, no surprise, is one of the ones that's been really the hardest hit by the Great Resignation. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can adjust for that today from a marketing perspective. And lastly, not just what's happened previously, but again, some of the same data from the McKinsey study that shows that this is still top of mind, that this Great Resignation is going to continue, that global workers are indexing high in terms of the probability that they may leave their job in the near future and potentially switch industries. From a consumer perspective, data from Google and Ipsos has shown that, again, no surprise, consumers are being more thoughtful about how they spend their hard-earned dollars. This has actually increased even post-pandemic, if you will, from November 2021, where 60% of consumers surveyed said that they intended to be more thoughtful about how they spend their dollars, to 70% in April 22. Obviously impacting this is inflation. Consumer price index up 8.5% in July. Those consumer prices are continuing to rise. It's cooled a little bit based on some August 2022 data that just came out earlier this week, but there's no question that the issue of inflation is top of mind for consumers. The potential for a looming recession is impacting decision-making across all consumers from a recruitment standpoint, and is impacting franchisors in general. Having said that, there is some optimism. As we all know, the IFA annual economic report showcased the potential for growth in franchising in 2022, with approximately 17,000 new locations added to the franchising space in 2022. Our friends at Franchise Business Review published a fantastic survey earlier this year that for those in franchising, the sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for franchising, and the folks that are actively in it do enjoy being a part of their existing organizations, are enjoying the opportunity provided by their franchisors and respect their franchisors, and ultimately would recommend their business to others. So what does this mean as folks change careers, leave different industries as part of the Great Resignation? There stands to reason that there's an opportunity for franchisors to add new franchisees to their systems as people choose different career paths. On the hiring front, there's no question in franchising that many franchisors are still struggling to fill open positions. We're going to talk a little bit about how marketing can impact that, from really demonstrating the value proposition of your brand and what that can offer for folks that may be looking to make that career change. And then lastly, kind of coinciding with some of the data that I showcased earlier about consumers being a little bit more careful with their dollars. You know, many more folks are talking, and the data shows this from folks like Accenture, that customers are now going to be, I think, increasingly local. As we know, franchisors and franchisees have a significant impact in the local business market. Where can we win those consumer dollars, and how can we win those consumer dollars and make our marketing spend and advertising spend as efficient as possible, and connecting with the right consumers at the right time in their moment of need? And the last piece, as we look at the future, one takeaway, whether we're talking about attracting new franchise owners from a franchise development perspective, attracting new team members from a recruitment perspective, or bringing new customers into the fold and making them longtime loyal advocates for the brand, the nature of way we advertise, particularly in digital, is changing, and data models are changing. We're going beyond demographic data and behavioral data to really target and reach consumers and ultimately make those marketing dollars as efficient as possible. A lot of what has come out of the pandemic is, especially from a consumer perspective, but also from a lifestyle perspective, that many consumers or job applicants or entrepreneurs are seeking to align with brands that align with their core values. And so data models are starting to reflect this beyond traditional demographic and behavior data and data models to reach those folks, and looking at more networks and richer clusters around meaning. The simple takeaway here is, how can your brand, whether it's through franchise development marketing, recruitment marketing, or consumer marketing, have a consistent message and a consistent presence online and leverage these new data models to reach the right folks at the right time? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and Location 3's Vice President of Strategy, Vera Shafiq, to talk about the franchise marketing trifecta model and kind of open up this discussion to see how we can impact these three pillars here today. Vera, take it away.
Thanks so much, Josh, and happy Franchisor Day, everyone. What a great day to be having this webinar. So Josh just walked us through what the current landscape looks like from a socioeconomic perspective. And as franchisors, I'm sure you're all acutely aware of the many ways in which this landscape affects your business, your operations, and your marketing. Franchise marketing is so much more than selling product or service, right? That's why we came up with the Franchise Marketing Trifecta, which is based on years of experience and understanding of franchise businesses. A successful holistic franchise marketing strategy is built upon three core pillars. Those pillars are what you see on the right in the circle: consumer marketing, recruitment marketing, and franchise development marketing. And planning and executing these three pillars holistically, keeping really mindful of the impact that each has on the other, is so important. Why is it so important? Because there is so much overlap between them. While there'll certainly be a difference in your target audiences when you're looking for your ideal customer versus your ideal worker versus your ideal franchise owner, there will be overlaps in their brand affinities and their mindsets. Secondly, a consistent technology and measurement strategy across all three pillars is key to understanding how all three pieces of the puzzle fit together. And finally, creative and messaging needs to be consistent across all three pillars in terms of brand values, purpose, and mission. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest. She's joining us today to talk a little bit more about the Franchise Marketing Trifecta, and that's Michelle McKee, Vice President of Marketing at Annex Brands. Welcome, Michelle.
Good morning and good afternoon to those on the East Coast. Thank you so much.
How are you doing today, Michelle?
Oh, doing wonderful. Yeah, it's tough down here in Southern California, but life is rough.
I was going to say, how's San Diego treating you?
Yeah, it's doing pretty great over here. So thank you so much for inviting me to join, and so happy to share, some of my experience and kind of what I've seen at both at other companies and also here at Annex Brands. I've had over 20 years experience in sales marketing at different brands, different size companies as well. So small franchises that were, looking to expand that had less than 10 units, kind of more mid-size, and then also large franchise brands, and then just B2B industries, private and publicly owned that weren't franchise as well. So it's interesting when we're talking about, these different pillars and how they affect different business models and different industries. And it still all comes down to, like you said, is understanding who the audience is and where they connect and what matters to them. So it's about a lot of listening. So yeah, I guess that's what we will be talking about today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kick this off by asking you personally, how important is each of these three marketing pillars in the work that you do for Annex Brands? And are the marketing programs that you run being executed in silos for these three pillars or holistically as one program?
Yeah, great questions. So, well, first off, Annex Brands, we are a franchisor. We provide shipping options, packing, tracking and creating freight, and then office services. So we have retail brands and we also have some commercial brands. But our mission and our vision overall is to provide more services to more people in more places, and really to add value to franchisees, employees, stakeholders, and communities. So that really is what drives everything, right? So when you're talking about these three pillars of consumer marketing, franchise development, and then also recruitment to make sure you have the right talent to be able to support it, it is vital that it ladders up to that mission, because if we're not adding value, then we're not following through with our promise, right? So that's, I would say that that's a major focus for us. We do have different departments. Each department actually here at Anich Brands manages their own hiring and intake, but one of the things we all focus on is a great, strong cultural fit, as well as skill sets, and making sure that we have the ability to provide the support that is needed and expected to drive that growth. For franchise development and consumer marketing, what's interesting is when I first joined, I reported under the umbrella of franchise development, and the head of the department and I were very aligned with our principles and philosophies, and really making value, adding value through data-driven decisions. So while we are separate, we work so closely together to make sure that we really can follow through with our mission.
Yeah, I think that's super important. So collaborating, even though you may have separate marketing budgets, you may have separate teams and hiring practices, that you're really collaborating with each other, sharing each other's data, I think is super important, as you mentioned, and really understanding your ideal customer profile is very similar across all three, and that you want to send them to the same website, ideally. Talking of that, how do you handle that? Do you send your prospects all to the same website, or do you have separate websites currently?
Yeah, we have separate websites for each brand. We have consumer websites that the customers of our franchise locations will go to, and of course that connects. We have a connection to our franchise development websites, but we do have franchise development websites for brands as well. So they are separate, but it does matter, the tone and how we speak, and the language that we use, how we talk about our services. There needs to be consistency across. So that is something that we do work closely on. And on the hiring side of things, we use hiring portals. But still, how we talk about, when we are on the recruiting side, how we talk about our company, our culture, our mission, we really want to attract the right talent. So still, it's that messaging that is really consistent throughout to make sure that we are aligned internally.
Yeah, I think that's key. Yeah, and the messaging, I'm sure that the agencies that you use to create your creative assets and messaging really have to be honed into all three aspects of those three pillars in order to give you guys a consistent presence online. So that's really good to hear. I wanted to move on a little bit and talk about the current economic situation, what the consumer climate looks like. Have you experienced with labor shortages, any challenges? Obviously, it seems like most franchisors are experiencing some kind of labor shortage where they are having to pump media dollars into recruitment campaigns. How have you fared in that climate?
Yeah, so I think what was really interesting about the industry that we are in and the services that we provide to our communities is that we offer essential services. So at a time frame where a lot of industries had shutdowns, I actually came from one of those industries. I was at a historic beachfront amusement park overseeing retail, all the retail locations, restaurants. We actually had franchise brands that we operated there as well. And the labor shortage in those industries there was such a struggle to manage staff, have shutdowns, and then bring everybody back in, right? We are very fortunate because we had really strong sales growth through the pandemic because we were supporting all of these people that were sent to work from home, right? So that kept our franchisees happy, right? And when you have happy franchisees, then it really feeds the whole system. And of course, at the home office level, that like everybody else, we see some level of turnover. Some level of turnover is natural, but we do have pretty decent tenure here of our home office staff. when we have seen some shifting, like in the marketing department specifically, we've seen that as an opportunity to restructure and rebuild. So we've created new roles that didn't exist, like having a marketing content writer. We didn't have one before. So now that content writer writes and creates the content for different departments, communications internally and externally, and helps align with our external agencies for messaging. So things like that, and elevating our, our digital role, so that our department can be more strategic and have the time, create that time to be able to look at these economy trends, labor trends, really understanding the shift in audience. And by doing that, we can provide that better support. So on the talent acquisition side, I would say that we've, just like everybody else, we've had to be flexible, but have pivoted. I think that was the famous word, right? Pivoted when there is a shift to make sure that we're filling it with something that either was a gap or is something that it creates brand new opportunity to open up and drive growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that's really important, the word pivot that you mentioned. Actually, I think it's something that we see a lot, especially recently with labor shortages, is having to adjust your marketing plan, adjust your marketing budget based on the current situation. For example, you may be, 100 miles an hour going into consumer marketing, trying to drive customer acquisition, and then realize that you have to pump the brakes because wait a second, we don't have the labor to fulfill all of this demand that we're driving, right? We have labor shortages. So now we're going to shift some of our budget into the recruitment side of things and be more mindful of filling those gaps. And then on the same vein, you could be going through a period of growth where you need new businesses opening, new franchise locations, and you are realizing that you need to inject more budgets into your franchise development campaigns to create the opportunity to have more locations. So it's kind of like a circle. It's like the circle of life, and that's how we see it. And that's why we kind of created this trifecta to essentially make it all work like one well-oiled machine, rather than looking at all of that in silos. Because essentially that is the franchisor's business, right? Those three aspects. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that. In terms of the last 12 months or so, we've seen a lot of change happening, as Josh mentioned, the Great Resignation, supply chain issues, economic climate, and all of that. Have you guys kind of pivoted to say, we need to kind of look at our marketing differently now because, we're seeing all of these knock-on effects happening? And if so, what is the new outlook for marketing for Annex Brands?
Yeah, thank you. Well, if in other industries, like I said, there's been a lot more volatility. Yeah. So fortunately, those three pillars have been fairly consistent and strong. Sales growth has been strong. We've not had tapering of growth at the unit level or resales. It's been fairly strong. We have had some shifting of that staffing. So unlike other industries and other places that, where external factors really do impact that a lot, we fortunately haven't been in that position to say, oh my gosh, drop all resources. We really need to run in this direction, because when you do that, then the other two aren't getting the focus and attention that they need. Right. But you always have to plan for that. So we always have to keep, top of mind that at any point in time, if something shifts, we have to be prepared for that. So I think that the challenge that we have on the consumer marketing side of things in particular is predicting, predicting what's going to happen in a few weeks, in a month. Because at one point it was like, we'll give you updates in 2 weeks. We're like, what does that mean? We're looking at are the court systems going to open up again? And if so, then that means, what does that mean for our business? What does it mean? And that was really early on in the pandemic, but things like, travel restrictions, passport photos. So we can understand that obviously a demand is going to shift. So looking at what's happening globally, not just in the local economy, and how that can impact our particular product or service categories, and finding ways to say, how do we talk about it? How do we talk about these services? If we know that people are going to start to prepare to travel, even though it's not open yet, but we are starting to see some movement. We have to change our messaging instead of ready, set, go. No, it's, travel prep starts here because people are preparing. And the last thing you want to do is sound tone deaf, right?
Sure.
So if you're like, start a new business and people are hunkering down, they're not spending anything, it's not the time to have that messaging. So a lot of our messaging with each of our campaigns, and whether it was, whether it's on the consumer side or franchise development, is that you're thinking, okay, what's best case scenario? What's worst case scenario? Where could this possibly shift? And how can we have a message that is going to still resonate throughout and be somewhat flexible? And then preparing for that contingency. So if there is a shift, you have a backup plan that can be in place. You've got a pipeline of whether it's campaign content or materials that you can turn things on or off. So, just like at the location level, across various industries, there are staffing challenges. Some of the things that we're looking at is how can we, with the amount of staff that we currently have, because if you ramp up too much, like the tech industry right now, and like cryptocurrency, then you have a lot of layoffs, right?
Right.
Certain industries hired up and then are like, great, we got to now start to shut things down even more so. So we don't want to do that. So you have to look at how can we use our current resources to maintain and keep things moving forward, continue to provide support for the system, and then also at the same time planning for change in both directions and evolving materials. So I think the biggest challenge is that we found is kind of that maximizing our resources in-house, whether that's time, money, bandwidth, and making sure we're focusing it in the right areas and using our technology and platforms to do work for us. Use our outside agencies to do work for us so that we can focus on the stuff that matters and plan for that.
Yeah, and you touched on a really great topic, which we were going to talk about today, which is technology and the role that technology is currently playing in marketing to allow you guys at Annex Brands to really drive success for each of the 3 pillars of the marketing trifecta. And I know you have a lot to talk about on this front because I know technology is a big topic for you guys, but things like CRM, automation, CDP, audience intelligence, competitive intel, all the things that you really need to automate or have some kind of technology platform to help you out with. How are you kind of growing that, kind of embracing that really as we kind of enter this era of cookieless where things are a little uncertain there as well, but we know that technology is going to play a big part in all of that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, the speed of technology and how quickly it changes. And
yeah.
if at any point in time you're investing all your time, energy, resources in one particular area, if there's disruption, you're in a really tough position. So you really have to make sure that you have kind of balanced technology resources, I would say, and that you have the ability to adapt with it. So like the cookies, nobody can control that and what's happening. Now you have to figure out, oh wait, we were relying on that. Now what do we do? So so we make sure that we are really focusing to have a good media mix, and that we are one of the things that we started doing 2 years ago is quarterly strategy planning, but in a different manner, and that is optimizing our data dashboards and platforms and finding ways to funnel all of that information to understand the story. Because as marketers, we're storytellers, right?
Sure.
If we don't know who we're telling a story to, then how do we know that they're even going to care about that story, right? So that's why the technology facilitates the work that we do. It helps us understand the story and all of those data inputs, and it allows us to listen. And we have to listen as marketers. You have to be curious as marketers, because if you're not curious and you think like, oh, this is how it is and this is what always works, then as soon as something like, I don't know, a pandemic happens, you're in a lot of trouble, right? Yeah. So having that quarterly strategy planning, that is something that keeps us in touch with it. And consistently meeting throughout to make sure that we're prioritizing projects, prioritizing time and efforts, that our dashboards and our technology is measuring the proper KPIs so that we're looking at the health of the business on different aspects for the different pillars, and able to monitor, if things are moving in the right direction, if not, and have the space then to say, why is it not? What options do we have? How can we resolve this? So I think the kind of having the technology and resources that gives you the space to maximize your team member strengths, that is going to be the foundation of all of the work that you do and allow you to support the franchise system. And most of our new unit growth, our strongest growth comes from franchisee referrals. So we know that keeping our franchisees happy is vital for us, right? And part of keeping them happy is providing the tools, providing the resources, informing them, keeping them engaged and educated on what's happening so that they can make the best decisions for their business.
Right.
And they're happy, they funnel it in. So that use of technology is really just facilitates understanding of what drives the business and where we need to focus efforts to keep things growing strong.
Yeah, that's great that your franchisee growth really comes through word of mouth and referrals. That's amazing. I was going to ask you in terms of Fran Dev and developing new franchise units. Are you seeing, and you may not know the answer to this because I know you don't focus specifically on Fran Dev, but I was curious as to if you were seeing new types of personas coming in, because as we know, with the pandemic, people have decided to pivot in their careers, have given up their 9-to-5, decided that they want to become a business owner or an entrepreneur. And guess what? Franchising is a great way to do that, right? It's a system that's already set up for you. You don't have to worry too much about branding or marketing. That's all done. And so people that used to be 9-to-5 office workers, people that had never thought about owning a business before, suddenly now have found it very appealing and are looking to join that group. They may not have any experience in franchising, may never have owned a franchise before, but now want to kind of experience this new kind of lifestyle. So I'm just wondering if you had any insights into, with Annex Brands, do you see people coming into your discovery days looking to kind of pivot their entire career to become a franchisor?
Yeah, so basically, how did the Great Resignation impact us?
Yeah, basically, long story short.
So we have really steady growth that's consistent over years. Our customer profile for new, franchise perspectives is fairly consistent. We often end up having people, this is the second phase of their career where they're like, I've done this my whole life, now I'm ready to switch to something else. So that's kind of always been the nature of it. So this is just more of that, right? So I will say when we do new franchisee training, after they've decided to become home franchisees, one of the first things that we do on the marketing training side is say, okay, tell us about why did you choose to get into franchising, A. B, why did you choose Annex Brands? Right. And a lot of the answers that I find that there are some that say, I was either laid off or my company was starting to film, and I decided this is a good time. So those external forces, whether these new franchisees that have joined the system already had this plan or not, there is that mindfulness of, oh my gosh, I see what's happening in this world, and I'm looking for something steady with stability. And they say things like, I'm looking for something really that's recession proof, So yeah. It's been definitely a strength that the services and the products that we offer have really added value to customers and communities. So there is a sense of safety and security that comes with when you open a business or when you partner with a business or anything, that knowing that there's a track record. There's a track record of consistency there. So I think with new franchisees coming into the system, customers coming in the door, that it's understanding what motivates that behavior, And we have been in a good position to be able to be a source of stability and a place to empower our franchisees to serve communities.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know, I would imagine, as you've mentioned several times, packing and shipping is a pretty recession-proof industry. So that's great. So yes, you are able to serve your community and keep your franchisees happy, which is great. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, we also have, what's unique about us is a lot of franchise brands will have resale. They'll have kind of in-house resale support, but they don't have a separate resale department. So we do have a separate resale department, and we pay close attention to our franchisees and if they've expressed desire to want to resell, and we assist them with that. We have a very long tenure of our franchisees. It's 11, I think it's 11 and a half years. And that's, you know, as a mature franchise system, we do have a good amount of, you know, our franchisees that are looking to maybe ready to go into retirement. And we know from consumer trends and what's happening in the labor that, you know, the baby boomer industry is starting to go into retirement and is opening up some new options and opportunities. So it's keeping that cycle flowing through, whether it's through resales, whether it's through new franchisees coming in, new customers coming in the door. I think you always want to have, just like business and sales, like loyalty and referrals is usually the #1 way that business comes, whether it's franchise sales or whether it's sales coming in, like, you know, customers coming in the door. And, you know, for us, brokers is the second, then organic, and then last it's paid lead. That's normal what happens. Paid media is usually helps supplement the organic growth of a company, the organic growth of sales. So I think having just seeing what's happening with this shifting, it goes back to listening and finding opportunity to connect with when there is a shift in the customer type, connect with those customers where they are in a way that resonates with them.
Yeah, that's great. I will ask you one last question before we move on to the last piece of this, and then questions and answers. And that's really to do with something I'm going to talk about in a second, which is the halo effect of when you do advertising in any one of the 3 pillars, or when you kind of promote any one of those 3 pillars, it creates a halo effect. For example, are your franchisees, your prospective franchisees, are they typically clients of Annex brands? Like, have they already had interactions with your brand because they're familiar with the brand, they've come in and they've used your services? And the same thing for labor and recruitment. You know, we see this very often with a lot of our franchisors, is that the people that they are hiring as staff are the people that have either used the brand before, have an affinity to the brand, or are actual loyal brand advocates. And because of that, they want to work for you, or they want to become a franchisee because they've already experienced being a consumer of your brand. Any insights into that with a specific perspective on Annex?
Yeah, that definitely plays a role. And, you know, that halo effect, it's called a halo for a reason. It's hard to like nail down like Jello. Good luck nailing it on a wall, right? It's just something that's kind of there and glowing.
Yep.
So because we do monitor our close rate of different leads, we do know that a lot comes from franchisee referrals. And a good portion of that, yes, is from customers of those locations or relationships. So there is that positive reputation that we could, you know, we could pull that from the fact that that is one of the strongest lead sources. And then on the customer side, what's I think really interesting and great to see is that even though during the time when a lot of businesses were shut down and everybody's, you know, every industry was thinking, what does this mean for me? What now? Do I spend? Do I not spend? Do I keep my doors open? Do I wait? Do I limit it? What do I do? It's just like everybody was frozen in time.
Yeah.
That as some of those customers had the small business owners and those retail storefronts or commercial industries and commercial businesses, when there were some slowing, that the other customer types that just opened up that we didn't have, they weren't a customer type of ours from the beginning, and now we've attained them and gained them as new. That came for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They found us for a reason. So part of that halo is having a strong online presence, having a good online reputation. We know that, one of the primary decisions factors that consumers and franchisees make, they do research on their own and they look at reviews. And if what other people have to say is not positive or strong, it's likely they're going to choose something else. So managing that online reputation is huge. Doing our best to manage customer experience at the location level is huge. And that feeds everything. That feeds our, staff retention here at the home office, right? We have happy franchisees, we have happy staff. We have good sales, we have happy franchisees. So I think keeping your hands on all these aspects of reputation, communication channels, and messaging is pretty important. We know that a lot of the new franchisees that are coming in the system, they do research on their own, and they know a lot more up front than they did a couple of years ago. So they're doing their due diligence. So having that good presence and that halo effect that's consistent throughout, if you don't have that, you're going to suffer in other areas. So the goal is to keep that strong and have it burning brighter over time.
Yeah, I think that was a great point that you made about the reviews, and especially the online presence, but the reviews part of that is just very key, that people, whether they're looking to buy a franchise, buy the product, or become an employee, those reviews are really kind of universal across the board. So yeah, great point. Well, I just want to thank you, Michelle, so much for the conversation. It's been really, really insightful and really great talking to you. We have one more slide to share with everyone here, which is what we just talked about. It's a great segue, creating that halo effect. And this is something that we at Location 3 have identified as being kind of pivotal in making your marketing strategy super holistic across the 3 pillars that we just talked about, because of this halo effect that happens. And it's a 1 + 1 = 3 type of effect, where powerful franchisee messaging that attracts prospective owners and entrepreneurs can have a knock-on effect to the other 2 pillars. And in the same way, compelling employee messaging that generates brand affinity for prospective talent will also have a knock-on effect to the other 2 pillars. And finally, captivating consumer messaging that attracts new and loyal customers, again, including reviews, can have that knock-on effect on the other 2 pillars. So this is what we identified as the halo effect, and are finding that the more and more that we do marketing holistically across these 3 marketing areas, the better results that we get, because we drive an exponential kind of effect on the results. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. And I think with that, we can turn it over to questions and answers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Vera. Fantastic insights all the way around. It's not an easy model, I think, is a quick takeaway there. It is practical, it can be adopted, and there is significant benefit. But it's not easy, and I think obviously it goes without saying that depending on your business category, whether you're an emerging brand or a legacy brand, there's some challenges that are unique to your business as a franchisor. Having said that, a couple of questions that did pop up, 2 very specific ones, and then one kind of more broadly. The first one, Vera, I'll direct to you, and then Michelle, if you have some thoughts as well. Regarding website and digital assets, there's a question that, do you recommend having a separate website for franchise development, or should it be merged with a consumer-facing website, and why?
Great question. So it's kind of like a nuanced question. From my personal opinion, I find that having the two pieces of that puzzle on one domain under one website and on one umbrella can have some really great benefits. And really that's to do with the halo effect, with consumers visiting the site might catch their eye, they can see the FranDev pages, and it might be something that piques their interest, right? And vice versa. And also, as we know, a lot of prospective franchisees are already customers and already brand advocates. So it just makes sense to not silo it. But, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's a right answer to that, but that would be my preference.
Okay. Michelle, any thoughts there, kind of how, or even maybe a little bit under the hood in terms of how Annex has approached this historically?
Yeah, well, each franchise brand that I've worked at or for or been a part of has done it a little differently. Because some of the KPIs that we measure, like how much time do they spend on the website, how many pages do they go to, a lot of it is understanding, you know, what are people looking, what is the consumer looking for, and how can we make it really easy for them to find it. But also having that awareness is really important. So I tend to lean toward the side of having separate websites, but having them connect to each other. So you know, if it's on the consumer side, I can say, open a franchise, and it's not difficult to find. They see it, and then they go right over to the other side, because the tone and how you deliver information is different on both sites. And then also vice versa, you want to have it linking over. So I tended to prefer the separate ones, but still having continuity and having it be very easy for both to find both websites.
Awesome. Perfect. Good stuff. Good feedback. One question for you specifically, Michelle, you know, from the brand side, any insight into, and I think you touched on this when you mentioned kind of your reputation and managing your reputation, you know, the impact that can have on consumer, on recruitment. But one question that came in was really around, are there any kind of specific channels or tactics that you have found either pre-pandemic, during, or kind of during this great resignation that have been maybe more of a standout when it comes to recruitment versus some traditional ones that may have been used in the past? Does anything stand out to you?
It sounds like that question, recruitment, is a lot on the hiring side.
Yeah.
I would say on the, just when we're talking how to generate reviews, it depends on the business model, the product or service, and who that audience is. So previously working in restaurant industries, it's how we generate reviews organically, because you don't want that big block that says they have paid for review, you know, public shaming. You don't want that to come up. You want it to happen organically. But there are strategies and tactics that you can do to increase. Like, did you have a great experience? Review us. It could be on the bottom of a receipt that's printed. You can, you know, at the location level, highlight it, hand it off. You can incentivize your staff at some point when it is, and this is mostly on like the restaurant side, is, hey, if you get this many reviews, if your name's mentioned, type thing. But I mean, every business model is completely different. So we look at ways here within our industry and our locations of how we can do that organically and in a way that builds reputation across various platforms. So it kind of depends on the commercial side. We don't have counters. It's not a brick and mortar that people walk into. So a lot of that is digital. So it's finding ways to connect that through email and through when somebody completes a job. I think one of the challenges, if you do that universally and say, hey, review us, and everybody gets it everywhere, you risk that chance of everybody reviewing you. So you have to be mindful of, if your business is in a healthy place to solicit that. And if it is in that healthy place or state, you need to build communication or tools, whether it's through technology or signage, ways that you can increase those reviews organically at a natural rate, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it reminds me, especially on the consumer side, I saw a stat that came out of the Inbound conference that HubSpot puts on every year that quick tip was to really focus from a review perspective on the 3.5-star reviews, because the ones are having a bad day, the 5s are super fans, that you can get a lot of business insight on the consumer side from those folks kind of in that 3.5 in terms of maybe concerns or challenges they had and some learnings for your team. So I thought that was interesting. One last question, and I'll put this to both of you, maybe Vera, if you want to kind of start, and then Michelle follow. This is something that we had talked about in planning for this webinar that we kind of anticipated. So it's interesting to see the question come up. But if consumer recruitment and franchise development, if whether it's from a team perspective on the franchisor side or a budget perspective or a combination of both, kind of live in their own, separate silos, if you will. What are even some baseline steps to kind of shift thinking or tactical, approach to maybe moving more toward this kind of integrated model that we call the franchise marketing trifecta?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really boils down to something really simple. For me, it would be put a meeting on the calendar, maybe once a quarter or once a month, whatever you can do to get those three teams together, right? So that those three teams working in their silos can come together and share data, right? I think that's the key, is sit down, bring all of your data, and sit and have a working session where you can actually strip that data down and extrapolate insights as to how each one of those three pillars is working towards the other, the halo effect. That would be the first step I would take. Then after that, you can start taking more baby steps into, okay, how do we integrate the websites? How do we integrate the messaging? How do we integrate technology, tracking, measurement, and kind of end up at one holistic view of performance across the board. But certainly if you're in the very early stages of that, putting meetings on the calendar between those teams is essential, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, recruitment, whether it's on the staffing side or whether it's, gaining customers or gaining franchisees, it's, there's still one brand. Well, 7 brands, one brand umbrella, but we support various brands, but we're still a unified team, right? So if we're functioning in such silos that we're not sharing that information, that we don't know how new franchisees are coming into the system, then how are we going to train them effectively? How can we prepare and hire staff internally to be able to support if we don't understand the inner workings of how each of those funnels function, right? So I think a lot of it depends on your growth rate. Are you in expansion mode? You are going to have a completely different plan, whether that's, both messaging, what platforms you're on, how much money you have allocated toward each of those pillars or individual ones. If you are in that massive growth rate, if you are in a let's hold and wait because we are looking to increase our, let's say that you're you are having challenges with sales, then you are going to need to focus in a completely different area, right? So understanding the state of your business and the health of your business and where you want the business to go, it's going to be different depending on what those goals are. So having those consistent meeting strategy sessions and sharing of information at touch points throughout the fiscal year is really the only way that you're going to have a cohesive plan and be able to expand the way that you need to.
Excellent. Great feedback. I think that's all the questions that came through. Again, thank you, Vera. Thank you, Michelle. Really great discussion today. A lot of really great takeaways. Thanks again on behalf of everyone at Location 3 for everyone here who has attended today. Thank you to the IFA for allowing us this opportunity. Again, you can find us on social. You can find Vera and Michelle specifically on LinkedIn. Reach us at hello@location3.com. We'd love to chat, answer any questions you have about this model or franchising in general. And as I said, we'll be at Springboard. We'll be at Emerging Franchisor Conference. I hope to see many of you in person there as well. I think that's it for us. Thanks, Sydney. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, Vera, and Michelle. That was a great presentation, and just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder that the recording and the slide deck will be available on community.franchise.org this evening. And if you have any questions for Vera, Michelle, or Josh, you can reach out to me directly and I can field those questions. I will drop my email in the chat really quick, but I'm sure a lot of you have spoken to me before. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks for your time, and thank you to Location 3 for sponsoring today's webinar. Have a good rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.